Wistoria might be the next big action show, at least from an animation point of view. The first episode looked excellent, and that is to be expected. The show is directed by action extraordinaire Tatsuya Yoshihara, director of Black Clover and action director of Chainsaw Man. He is incredible. Let's break down the visuals. The episode was directed and storyboarded by Tatsuya Yoshihara, and it was exactly what you'd expect it to be. The boards were fantastic with complex, dynamic compositions, rack focuses, snappy timing, and other techniques used to make the final product interesting to look at. More about them later. The designs drawn by Sayaka Ono look great. Nothing too out of the ordinary, but they have just the right amount of exaggeration, and the drawing quality throughout this episode was quite strong. Also, the line art is interesting. The outlines are processed in an uneven manner. That, coupled with the relatively flat coloring, makes the features pop out in the best possible way. The general aesthetic, with a couple of exceptions that I'll get into in a second, looks great as well. Alright, let's go through this thing. The backgrounds near the start looked amazing. The flags were CG, but I think the rest was hand-drawn. This scene and the episode as a whole is so Tatsuya Yoshihara built that it makes you forget that he was neither a key animator nor an animation director for it. That smooth timing of the motion, the fabric animation, and those signature smears, it's not Yoshihara, but it's definitely Yoshihara. And what I mean by that is that Yoshihara most likely made extensive corrections as the episode director, and said corrections were heavy enough to alter the final product. This isn't the first time he has done something like that. We got an action scene, and here's a problem I had with the art direction and compositing. Both were solid, but the dungeon scenes looked somewhat unappealing. Firstly, the art direction was a bit busy, and secondly, the scenes were a bit too dark. It's not that big of a deal, but it's worth pointing out. Very smooth action here. The effects are simple but look nice, and the rocks move around a lot, although the texture work on them is, simply put, obnoxious. Loved the timing here. Will is far away from the camera, but 3 frames later he has closed in on and moved past it. Here's one of many rack focuses used in this episode. In filmmaking, a rack focus involves a shift in focus from one object to another. Also, the digital flare was a nice addition. This portion was animated by Isuta Meister, a longtime collaborator of Yoshihara. It wasn't particularly mind-blowing by his standards, but we did get some solid character animation and clever camera placements thanks to Yoshihara's boards. It's the little stuff. The blood spilling out of the monster was actually animated, same with the drool here. Also, saliva has a slightly higher viscosity compared to water, so it moves differently, and that was taken into account. Good stuff. The layouts were really strong throughout. Sure, they could have simply drawn a hallway, but they decided to frame it from such a complex perspective. Same can be said for several other shots. These high-angle perspectives make Will look small and insignificant, while this low-angle shot makes the whole thing look large and intimidating. Classic visual storytelling. Smooth character acting yet again. That outfit is quite detailed, but the frame count on the motion was high. The way his shoulders moved was fairly lifelike, and the camera moved accordingly. Also, insane background animation here. The board, the table, and the ground was hand animated, despite the fact that most of it was covered by the flame, and the glow from it obscured the rest of the screen. They could have easily zoomed in on a static background, but they didn't. That's effort. Also, wonderful energy payoff. This animated zoom was the build-up, and this energetic composition and effects were the payoff. Yoshihara is so good at that. The perspective work was amazing throughout this episode. This shot, for example, starts off as a regular front profile, but the closer she gets to the camera, the more warped the scene gets. By the end, it turns into a high-angle shot with foreshortening. I won't go over every cut of character acting, we'd be here forever if I did. The characters kept moving, even the cat was well animated. Lovely effects here. The sky itself is an illustration, but the 2D effects spread out and the sky disappears, giving it the illusion of the sky opening up. I know I said I won't cover every cut of character acting, but I need to talk about this scene. Tatsuya Yoshihara's corrections as the ED were really obvious here. The incredible wind effects and the natural body language was a joy to look at. The way his hand automatically moves backward anticipating the fall. Incredible attention to detail. Also, more complex layouts. Those smears and that timing is classic Yoshihara. Not only do the characters move a lot, the camera is never static either. It hovers in a subtle manner complementing the motion. More of that Yoshihara built character acting and smears here. The characters feel alive, the shots feel energetic, the weight and energy distribution is perfect. This entire scene was so competently animated. Also, this low-angle walk cycle is similar to Yoshihara's work on CSM. And that brings us to the fight. It's about time, really. Not a fan of this background. I guess it's supposed to represent the rocky floor, but the lack of depth makes it look like they are walking on a carpet. They did add these darkened sections to convey volume, but the perspective doesn't change, so it looks flat. Such a high-energy shot. This guy and the camera are in a race against each other. It's never a proper tracking shot, which makes it feel chaotic. Also, the wind effects appear several frames after the fact, which sells the speed. Ambitious camera work here, although naturally the character animation is a bit jumpy and inconsistent. This facial expression is fantastic. The well-defined teeth and the line work and shadows, especially around the eyes and mouth, gets the terror across. I wonder who was responsible for this cut. Yoshihara probably corrected this section because the build-up and the smeary release reminded me of his style. These two cuts were actually animated on once, and we got a short bit of background animation, although the texture on the background was a bit distracting. Perspective work was great too. The foreshortening on the legs looked amazing. I liked this transition from the past to the present. In technical terms, it's called a match dissolve, and I'm usually not a fan of those, but this was nice. And with that, the fight began. We got nice smears and wind effects here. Also, the background was animated, which is always a plus. This is the look they were trying to accomplish with that carpet background earlier. Also, of course, impact frame spam. This shot was insane. The lines are blurred, so it's hard to tell, but I'm fairly certain that the entire background is hand animated. The windows, the ceiling, all of it. That plus the complex path the camera takes and the complicated perspective on the character. It was ridiculous. Back to the fight. Nice swordplay here. The framing isn't unique. The wide shot with the sliding background layers is very common, but the movement was great. The running animation was top-notch, and then it switched to a more over-the-top display of speed, with Will turning into a smeary smudge accompanied by wind effects. Another rack focus on this animated yet somewhat stationary scene, making it more engaging. We got multiple tracking shots with background animation. A couple of things here. Firstly, the monster is obviously 2D, and it obviously has a large line count. Well-defined muscles, unorthodox facial anatomy, you get the idea. It must have been hell to draw, but it kept moving. Also, the backgrounds did look jarring. Not a fan of the texture work. The fight had several quick cuts of background animation thrown in, which, besides being really impressive, served as a break from the aforementioned poor textures. Also, just in case you forgot this was a Yoshihara episode, here's something straight out of Black Clover. The team made the monster's movement feel wild by adding a lot of wasted motion. That of course meant they had more stuff to draw. This shot, for example, tracked the weapon and then zoomed out to show the creature. Absolutely phenomenal animation here. I just talked about how difficult drawing this thing must have been. Now imagine doing that on once, where every part of its body moves, all while adding additional line work to the already high line count. Artist unknown, are you insane? This walk was accompanied by a ton of wind effects and a parallax effect created by the sliding layers. In case we didn't have enough monster animation already, here's more. The stylized line art looks amazing, and every single muscle on the body moves, including the abs. That's an insane level of detail to animate. Loved the fact that you could see the monster building up the energy from its core. It was a nice touch. Also, more wind effects. Every action had them. Even the camera sliding along the sword. Hey, I'm not complaining, it looks really cool. And finally, we got a couple of well-drawn close-ups, followed by Kutsuna lightning, the timing of which was straight out of Black Clover. Some wonderful effects brought us to the end of the fight. And just in case you thought the stuff was done, they threw in this intense facial expression and two wonderfully animated walk cycles. That last one isn't even a cycle. It's not looped. The walking is individually animated from start to finish. That's just extra effort. And that was the episode. Very good in case you couldn't tell. I don't expect it to keep up this level of quality all the way through, but since it is Yoshihara leading the project, I think we can expect more highlights. That's about it. Liked the video? Check out this other bit of content on screen. Like and subscribe, and until next time.